We have 1 hour time for a very important topic. This is the opportunity to be really focused and efficient. And I'm very proud that we have a European perspective and then the regional debate. And it's really a pleasure to have today as host Eva Meidel, member of the European Parliament, member of ITRE, AIDA and ECON committee, and EPP group rapporteur for the DSA and DMA in the ECON committee, shadow rapporteur on the European strategy for data, and vice president on the SME of the EPP. Thank you, Eva, that you are here today. I think you have full schedules in Strasbourg. It shows how important this topic is and how important SMEs are for you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for organizing today's discussion. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you. Having a particular focus on Central and Eastern Europe, I think, is crucial for the debate. I have to admit that this is a perspective that is sometimes missing from the narrative, but it is one that is very much needed, because we know very well that our region is a hub for economic growth in the tech and digital areas. I have been working on both of the files as EPP group rapporteur in the ECON committee, and we're at this moment in the final phase of the negotiations. I have had shadows meeting both yesterday and today on these topics. And while the discussion is focused on the DSA, please also allow me to just add a few words on some general trends in the DMA as well. Throughout these negotiations, we have seen how the groups on the left in the European Parliament are mainly focusing on the protection of the end user and the consumer. And of course, we as EPP group also support measures to protect the end users. But the reality is that many of these measures proposed to secure transparency, safety, and privacy are to the detriment of SMEs who rely on platforms to kind of proliferate their business. So finding this middle ground, it's not necessarily a political wish or a desire, but we in the EPP group believe it's an absolute necessity. During the negotiations, where I stand and fought for was to keep a ban on targeted advertisement, or even an opt-in for that matter, out of the text. I know how important targeted advertisement is to SMEs, and given the large scope of the DSA, such restrictions would really make not much sense. So we have worked on measures for interoperability in both the DSA and DMA that would help SMEs, while of course being practical and addressing security concerns. We have maintained and introduced some exemptions for SMEs, and we have asked the European Commission to draft guidelines for medium-sized companies. And we maintained the liability regime from the e-commerce directive and the country of origin principle. All of these concrete steps, especially in the final text, include an opt-out for advertising, and it will be crucial to SMEs continuing to grow and to thrive, I think, in the single market. I would like to sum up by saying that the temptation to regulate and over-regulate is quite high in the European Parliament. However, when it comes to new phenomena, the regulation also has to be smart. The DSA really aims, should take another step towards that target. They don't need to aim to kill platforms, but to make them more responsible, to make them more equitable, more equipped to support democracy and freedom of speech, and to address concerns related to illegal content. We also have to make sure that this legislation promotes competition and ensure a true level playing field for companies and why not for that to be particularly aimed and hopefully ensure a level playing field for European companies. I think we have to be cognizant of the spillover effects that targeting big tech can have on SMEs. And I think what's important is to craft a legislation not with the idea of simply reining American tech giants, but with the idea of promoting and empowering our own European companies that could become European champions in the future. So this would be a part of my introduction remarks. I hope to a certain extent it was quite concrete for you to see where at least the negotiations in Econ stand. And I look forward to hearing also from the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, very much for this update where we are now with DMA and DSA. I think what you mentioned is very crucial. It's not only black and white, it is about many grays between. And if we are speaking about consumers in the end, we are also working, or we are employees or entrepreneurs. I think 2/3 of employees are by SMEs, so we should not forget that is always a more complex situation. And I think what you say, it's very important also that we have to see that we also still be a continent of opportunities. And if you mention, I think the last tech giant we had from Europe was from 1976, SAP. This is for nearly 50 years ago. I think something we have to change, that we have also champions. Otherwise, we have always to discuss Chinese or American companies because there are no European champion left. Thank you very much. And now we're coming to the European keynotes. That means that we have now the input directly for Brussels for a later regional debate. And the first speaker is Victoria de Bosson, Senior Public Policy Manager, CCA Europe. Victoria, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Art, for the invitation to speak today on the Digital Services Act. So as you were saying, I'm Senior Manager at CCIA, the Computer and Communication Industry Association, and we represent a range of large and small European and international technology companies. Before going into my main points, I'd like to say a few words on what MEP Maydon said. I think you're right, it's very important to reach a balance between the consumers and SMEs' interest and make sure that everybody is taking into consideration when drafting those new rules. Fully agree with you on keeping a ban or an opt-in out of the text, and I'm going to come up on this a bit later. Same for the country of origin. It is very important for small and medium-sized companies, so we should keep the country of origin. So the DSA is very important for SME. We know that, whether they are business users of digital services, and that's the spillover effect that MEP Maydon was talking about, or for small and medium-sized companies, which are digital service providers. So let's first look at what we call the spillover effect and SMEs as business users. Since December, some lawmakers have jumped on the DSA as an opportunity to regulate a variety of other topics and even in much details. Some lawmakers have gone as far as adding new sections, for instance, on marketplaces and advertising. Proposed amendments to the DSA could make online marketplaces liable for all products sold through their services. If online marketplaces were to become liable for every product sold through their channels, they would force to adopt a very cautious approach. In case of doubt, online marketplaces would have to take products down, meaning fewer products would become available online. Some categories of products could even be considered too risky and be completely taken out of the digital services. Marketplaces would only be able to rely on big trusted brands, and they would unlikely accept products coming from smaller, younger, and less experienced suppliers, which pose a bigger risk. This would harm both European small sellers, but also the consumers. Contrary to the EU goals, it would make Europe less fit for the digital age and slow down its digitization. That said, lawmakers are asking legitimate questions on product safety. Marketplaces concern could, for instance, be addressed by a tailors initiative, and this is already on its way with the European Commission new General Product Safety Regulation, GPSR, which is also currently being negotiated in IMCO. Another hot topic is online advertising, and we discussed that already a bit. Some European policymakers are now threatening to severely limit or ban targeted advertising. This would in particular limit small companies' opportunity to connect new consumers and thereby limit their growth. The last few months have shown how crucial it is for companies to be online and reach new consumers. We believe a coherent interpretation and enforcement of GDPR rules across the EU would alleviate many of the concerns raised by the MEPs. We caution against any new rules that would create confusion or tension with the EU Privacy and Data Protection Act. Before developing new rules limiting advertising, we must properly assess the advertising landscape, and this hasn't been done for the moment. We must consider the impact of targeted advertising on small companies. This includes acknowledging that online ads are an essential source of income for many industries, for instance, the European news and media. Let's not look at small and medium-sized digital service providers, which represent 92% of European online platforms, and we don't hear that enough. 10,000 of companies will have to comply with the DSA. The DSA can either be one set of general standards for all digital services or become a complex mix of sector-specific rules. We believe that the DSA should remain horizontal and principle-based. Targeted sector-specific measures, whether legislative or non-legislative, can then be built on this strong DSA foundation. The second point we want to bring up, and as MEP Maydell said, is to keep the country of origin as set in the e-commerce directive. The country of origin remains a key feature of the EU single market, and it should therefore be kept. Undermining this principle would severely harm small business capacity to offer service across the EU. Having one single set of rules rather than 27 is crucial for SMEs. Keeping the country of origin also means strengthening the EU economy and competitiveness regarding other global players. Last but not least, the DSA should not impose measures that would lead to a mandatory use of automated tools. Automated tools can help detect illegal content, product, or conduct, proactively flagging what needs to be removed. However, such technology have limitation and cannot access the context in which online content is shared. Furthermore, any obligation leading to a mandatory use of automated tools would favor large platforms, as such practice requires a lot of technical know-how. A possible DSA obligation to keep illegal content offline, known as a stay-down obligation, could lead to uncontrolled use of monitoring technology, which risks censoring free speech and removal of legal products. Such an obligation would be problematic also for SMEs as business users. So again, back to the spillover effect. They could be restricted in expressing themselves online, but also in the product that they can sell and buy. The DSA should not prescribe measure in practice that would run counter the principle of ban on general monitoring. So to conclude in a nutshell, to enable SMEs growth and facilitate the reach to a broad consumer base, the DSA should maintain the horizontal approach, keep the country of origin as set in the e-commerce directive, do not impose measures like a stay-down obligation that would lead to the mandatory use of automated tool and be against the ban of general monitoring. More generally, the DSA should ensure that Europeans continue to enjoy all economic and social benefit of digital services.
Victoria, thank you very much. This was very comprehensive, a lot of information. I would say, I would only to add, because we have also limited time, to spill over, I would also add interdependence, because if we're speaking always about SMEs, we have also to see they're interacting with large companies. So you cannot, it's the same like spillover, but in fact, you cannot separate them so easily like they are in the theory. And the second thing, what I think is also very important, consumer protection is very important, but what is the other impact for the consumers? So we are not discussing what is this for the service, what it means for prices, what is all involved for the consumer also. It's not always protection. Not everybody, I think this must be wider. And now I think we have to go directly to Nikolai Bartzenwitz from the Research Director, Law Technology Hub, University of Surrey, Research Association Center for Technology and Global Affairs, University of Oxford. Nikolai, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I just wanted to say that I share the concerns that, well, our host, SME Connect, and some other organizations like Allied for Startups have raised about some aspects of the Digital Services Act and how it will negatively affect SMEs as providers of digital services. So for example, I share the concern about the so-called out-of-court dispute settlement mechanism, which in practice risks becoming a tool for competitors and organized online trolls to harass and may perhaps even bankrupt SMEs. But what I wanted to focus on in my short remarks today is to look at users, at SMEs as users of online platforms and not as providers. And from the perspective of SMEs as users, I think that the DSA debate focuses a bit too much on effective enforcement against platforms, but not enough on responsible enforcement. And it focuses too much on how platforms themselves affect users, but not enough on how users will be affected by government and government sanctioned agents like the so-called trusted flaggers under the DSA. And I think that the DSA implicitly adopts a polite fiction that all EU member states will equally care about interests of not only their own citizens and businesses, but of all others. And thus, it gives far-reaching powers to domestic administrative authorities, not even courts, to issue binding orders against what those authorities see as illegal content across the EU, not only in their own country. And the DSA also gives domestic authorities powers to approve so-called trusted flaggers, organizations whose complaints about content on online platforms will by law be given priority. So how will this go wrong? Take, for example, a visual artist or a writer who use an online platform to promote or sell their works. Both the artist and the writer may feel perfectly safe that they could not face any adverse action by administrative authorities from their own country of origin. But what about other EU member states, other trusted flaggers from other countries? Can the users really feel safe that no EU country will decide that this particular work, whatever its nature, perhaps promotes some dangerous ideology according to that administrative authority from that member state? And I want to be clear, the DSA provides some safeguards when issuing an order to act against illegal content and asking for it to be removed with effect in other EU countries. Theoretically, authorities are required to check if the content is illegal everywhere where the order is meant to apply. So this power is theoretically limited, but any good lawyer will rightly ask, are there any effective procedural safeguards? And one procedural safeguard is that the online platform that receives the order could, again, theoretically, devote significant resources to investigate whether the content in question is illegal. And if they disagree with the order, they could fight it in the courts of that country where the order came from. But experts know well that platforms, especially smaller or less profitable ones, will rationally choose simply to follow the order. And even if it means overblocking of content that may be legal everywhere in the EU except for the country where the order came from, or even really legal in that country. So thinking about the users who are affected by or may be affected by illegal content orders, they may be surprised or even mortified that they are affected this way by actions of a foreign authority, but there may be very little they can do. Can we really expect them to bring litigation in the country or in a foreign country, in a foreign language against an order of an authority they don't really understand? So I don't think that's very realistic. So this is not an effective measure of redress, and the redress is really not addressed in the DSA. So those risks could be addressed by giving users better tools to challenge actions that affect them, but actions that come from foreign authorities. This could involve perhaps involving the digital services coordinators from the country of the user or from the country of the service provider and give them powers to countermand or cancel such orders coming from from foreign authorities if those orders pretend to have extraterritorial effect. But I can see how this would raise alarm bells for some, because this may mean that enforcement against platforms will be less effective, that there will be additional friction in enforcement. But my point is that effective enforcement is only valuable if it is responsible, and if we have effective procedural safeguards for it to be sure that it respects user rights. So my conclusion is that the advice I would have is that to avoid creating more harm than good, the DSA should adopt a more realistic view of the consequences of some of the very deep disagreements, both ideological and about what's counterfeit goods and things like that. So deep disagreements that are present across the EU. We cannot just forget about those. And thinking about enforcement, before we step on the accelerator, let's make sure that we're going in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is very valuable, this approach to see SMEs as users and also the user rights. I think if we speak about consumer protections, we need also to see the rights of users and entrepreneur freedom. And I think what you say is also about efficiency and also enforcement. This must be also practical, and I think this is, we will build up obstacles. Large companies can handle this and small companies cannot handle this, and we have too often regulations where also the big ones are complaining, but in the end we see the market share, SMEs are shrinking and big global companies are growing. So we have to really have to focus there, how to make it fair and feasible also for SMEs. And always not forget it's an ecosystem, not separated players only. So now we're coming to the regional debate. And I think now also to see what is this perspective, Central Eastern Europe. I think digitalization is really a chance. And there is also another perspective also from the consumers. And I think this is very interesting to come to this debate now. And we started with Kamila Sotomska from ZPP Poland. Please, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much, Horst. So in the first place, I'd like to thank you and also SME Connect for inviting me. I think it's a great privilege to be able to speak on such a distinguished panel. And I cannot really say much now, except for agreeing with all that has been said before. So I would like to thank very much Ms. MEP Meidel for the remarks she's made. I think it's a great approach, and I'm very happy to hear that such changes are taking place. And I have also taken some notes about the points that my predecessors have made. So I very much agree with the idea that the DSA should keep with the horizontal approach, with the exclusion of very extensive obligations for marketplaces, keeping out the targeted ads as they are so important for the SMEs so they are able to thrive and use business, as well as issues of overblocking of content and ensuring effective enforcement rather than creating a law that is good only on paper. So also referring to what Horst you have said about digitization as a chance for our Central and Eastern European member states. Yes, it's very true. In terms of Polish GDP, so the share of digital sectors and creation of Polish GDP is increasing steadily. So in 2014, it was only 4%, through 6% in 2018 to expected to 12% in 2025. So we cannot ignore the chance that the digital sector is creating for businesses in our part of Europe. On that note, I would like to add something that is also very, very much dependent on the Polish position, actually, so the country of origin and the country of destination, as we can see. The country of origin principle and its maintenance is key from our perspective to the whole DSA package. country of destination, country of origin is of course this principle that makes makes digital business for businesses from our part of Europe possible, because they don't have to fear that in case of a dispute they will have to take recourse to foreign courts, hire foreign lawyers, and engage in a very costly dispute. Meanwhile, there is a proposal for introduction of country of destination that comes mainly from Poland and France. But I think that here it's very important to know that the two countries actually are proposing the same idea for different reasons. So while Poland aims for a country of destination in order to increase safeguards for illegal, maybe not illegal, but harmful content on online platforms, France is proposing it for the reasons of products. And here exactly, we're very much afraid that if such a proposal is actually implemented, it will have big and negative effect on the fragmentation of the digital single market. We have actually inquired with the Ministry of Digitization how they are envisaging the impact, the economic impact of such provisions. And we really see that the narrative that they're employing is currently focused on the idea of the digital services coordinator, and that every digital service coordinator will use the DSA to enforce their laws. But this is exactly the point that we're making, that in result, we will see the fragmentation of the digital market. Nevertheless, I need to say there are some very positive developments that I'm very happy to see, and that will be an amendment proposed actually by MEP Maydell. So first is the prolongation of time between the entry into force and the applicability of the DSA. We're very happy to see that, because we know that on the national level, the appointment of a digital services coordinator is going to be a very hard nut to crack. We have very many different regulators who on a national level will have competences, and will have to figure out how to share them and how to create this one authority to do that. So I believe that really the extension of this time from 3 to 9 months is a very welcome development by all the actors involved. Of course, there are certain, as I mentioned, certain things that are concerning us, so the country of origin, targeted ads. And also I might actually develop the argument about the marketplaces. The extensive obligations of marketplaces will lead not only to overblocking of content and products, but also it kind of is detrimental to the idea of asymmetric regulation that is that the whole DSA is structured around, because we have the asymmetric regulation between the smaller and the bigger platforms. And if we're creating the bigger regulations for the marketplaces, then we're starting to distinguish obligations in terms of the business model that is employed by a digital company rather by its size. So here we see the cracks in the whole approach. And again, just maybe to conclude, again, a very, from our perspective, a very welcome development. Even though it's not directly targeted at the SMEs, we have seen the proposal again from MEP Maydell to limit the obligation to provide access to databases and algorithms without prejudice to the directive on trade secrets. So even though it does not apply directly to SMEs, it's very important, because SMEs are the users of technological developments. And if there's the ultimate obligation to provide access to algorithms and databases, then the motivation to really create innovation and a new product will be decreased. So on that note, I think I will finish and give the floor back to you, Horst. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the Polish perspective. I think this is also, we have to underline, France has another interest than Poland. And if you can grow and go in competition with the old industry nations in the European Union, this is a chance for you where it is clear that there's another interest. I think it's also very, what you say is in the end, innovation. I think it must be always encouraged that innovation is paying off. And I think we have to balance it with the consumer rights, but it should be so that innovation is still in the interest of SMEs and not that they are going then to Canada or America to have the companies there, because this will be also a risk. And I think it's very also important what you say is that we have to see also the chances of the DSA. This is not only negative. There are also some good sides for SMEs, which we should also underline. Now we're coming to our second speaker, Greg Morocki, Director Public Policy EIB Europe. You have Polish roots, I think. So this is perhaps the perspective you bring in from the Central Eastern Europe, please.
Thank you, Horst, Ms. Maydell and Mr. Boni and fellow stakeholders. Thank you for this invitation, and this is definitely a timely opportunity to discuss the DSA dossier. I represent IAB Europe, European Level Digital Advertising and Marketing Ecosystem Association, and act as their Director of Public Policy. In my intervention, I would like to essentially do two things. I would like to bring to our attention importance of recognizing that digital advertising enables the proliferation of small and medium-sized businesses, which the European Commission rightly so considers the backbone of European economy, and in particular stress the importance of these businesses for the CEE region. And second, appeal to the EU policymaker to indeed reject proposals for a ban or other restrictions on targeted advertising, and instead recognize value of the EU's existing legal framework for privacy and data protection, and to avoid the inclusion of any provisions in the DSA that would undermine it. And obviously, in connection to that, we're glad to hear Ms. Maydell's reasonable approach indeed about recognition of that framework. So to highlight a few things, our network, which comprises both national associations and corporate membership, does indeed bring together over 5,000 businesses, and many of them would be small and medium-sized enterprises. So I'm thinking technology providers, advertising technology companies, local advertising agencies, as well as local and regional publishers, including news media publishers. And we have a strong presence in collaboration with the CEE markets, including with the said national associations in these markets: Poland, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia. So I think some of our remarks will be quite relevant. We are indeed observing how important digital advertising is for the SME sector, and that it helps to act as an indispensable enabler of companies' business operations. We have recently released a paper which does illustrate the importance of the CEE markets and associated business opportunities, for instance, looking at the e-commerce growth in the region during the pandemic. So while within the EU, we have seen that the growth of the number of users who were buying goods or services online grew by 6%. In the CEE region, we observed double-digit increases. And so for these SMEs, advertising is an important, essential almost component of driving sales, in particular in the times of crisis. A different survey of one of our national associations revealed that as the SMEs have been recovering amid COVID-19, 60% of them have been using paid digital advertising, and then half of that surveyed pool said that digital advertising would be more important now than ever in the times of crisis. but then also looking beyond sort of conventional, if you like, business. I guess we would all agree that Europe is not just an economic area, but we would also aspire to share values, create vibrant local cultures and rich regional diversity. At first glance, maybe this has nothing to do with advertising operations, but if we look under the hood and think about some of the local specialities, cultural festival in Romania, or maybe some of the protected products. I think there is a white cheese, brinded cheese in Bulgaria. Then we get to quickly appreciate that data-driven advertising and personalized advertising in particular would be critical to protecting these cultural assets of Europe, because these local entrepreneurs and manufacturers, they rely at the end of the day at providing the right marketing message to the right audience and at the right time, and depriving them from any of these data-driven opportunities to reach the audiences would only actually reinforce traditional market dynamics that I guess are unfairly skewed to big players with bigger advertising and outreach budgets. And it's not really a small market. I think DG Agri estimate that the value of EU quality schemes, geographical indications, and traditional specialities guaranteed is at over 75 billion euros. So indeed, if we look at the big picture, 99% of all businesses in Europe are SMEs, and this will be very true for CEE. In Poland, it's like 99.8% of all enterprises, and they are dependent on advertising. And they often lack the cash resources to navigate the period without the sales. This is why they require targeted advertising strategies to minimize actually the any wastage and reach relevant consumers, probably more than any other type of businesses. And very quickly, looking at the DSA from our perspective, we fully support the requirements in the proposal to improve the overall B2B and B2C transparency of digital advertising. So I'm thinking Article 24 in particular. The industry has been long working on enhancing trust and transparency across the value chain and vis-a-vis the user. So there's a full alignment there. The DSA proposal does also helpfully confirm the important role of standards and codes of conduct that can play in enabling industry practice. So Article 36 is a good example there, and as with proven track record in industry standardization, we appreciate regulator-supported approaches. But we do also believe that any discussion on advertising-related transparency in the DSA must be fact-based. So this is to what has been already said. There are already quite a lot of transparency requirements in the GDPR. So I'm thinking GDPR, I'm thinking data controller disclosure, information about data processing purposes, legal basis used for data processing. And so this is why it's important for the DSA not to undermine existing law, which in fact, data protection authorities continue to interpret and provide guidance on just as we speak. So I think it's important for us to recognize what the DSA was originally scoped for, what the actual impact assessments have been made. From our perspective, it would be counterproductive and with grave consequences, in particular to the small businesses, to have two instruments, DSA and GDPR, that being essentially overlapping laws with similar enforcement mechanism. And we would rather defer to applying and enforcing the existing law, which would help us to avoid perpetuating legal uncertainty. So I will stop here, Horst. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. I think this was very important that you say it must be clear rules and not overlapping. We have this also in other regulations, not only here, that it's then confusing. And I think this is even always for SMEs the one hurdle what they have to fight, and also the business is dying at the end. The second thing, I think what you said with digital ads, for me it's also something like democratic in the market, because it's gives a chance for SMEs to compete and also to have a voice and go cross-border. It makes it, in fact, more fair that they have with the low budget, with a small budget also can get a target audience. I think we should not underestimate this, otherwise large companies can have advertisement everywhere. So I think this is the point, what is crucial. And we're coming now to Karina Stan. I think she is representing Developers Alliance as head of Brussels office, but you have also perhaps a certain perspective from Romania. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, of course, I'm Romanian, and thank you for inviting me to this timely debate. And also, I would like to add our appreciations for Mrs. Maidel openness to consider, the sensitive trade-offs and the direct and indirect impact for SMEs of, both the DSA and the DMA. These are crucial regulations that will have, a very important impact on the digital economy all over the EU. So for us, the Digital Services Act is an opportunity. We see it as an opportunity to have, an updated, harmonized framework for providing digital services across the EU. And this will benefit all internet businesses, including those of software developers and those of Central and Eastern Europe. And this part of the EU needs more than ever appropriate conditions for digital transformation and for overcoming the digital divide, especially in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. And I would add my voice on what was said before by the previous speakers, because, and I think it's not enough repeated, I don't know, the core principles of the e-commerce directive, the country of origin, limited intermediary liability, the prohibition of mandating general monitoring. These are essential for preserving the ability of SMEs to operate cross-border and to benefit from the single market. And we are a little bit disappointed, I have to say, because unfortunately we see a series of amendments proposed by the European Parliament that are undermining these key principles. And it is worthless if the proposed text affirms these principles but fails to offer guarantees that it will be viable in practice. And we have to pay attention to, because this will have a significant negative impact on citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms, and also will severely reduce the capability of European businesses, and in particular of startups and SMEs to innovate and grow. And I would like to present three major observations with regard to the amendments that currently are under MEPs' consideration. First of all, the DSA is supposed to be a framework regulation, horizontal, with clear and feasible obligations. It should set the outcome to be achieved by the companies and to provide the right incentives for that. It should not be a one-size-fits-all research. It's impossible because the scope is so large and diverse, and no business is like others. Even in the same category, no social media platform is like the other. Also, it shouldn't be a bundle of disproportionate requirements that are intended to address specific issues. This is for sectoral regulation too. It is more suited for that. Also, it should not address societal problems. For this, clear internet rules are only a part of the solution. The root causes for societal problems need to be addressed as well. I mean, the DSA cannot be, the panacea against disinformation, misinformation, against all types of discrimination, against lack of digital literacy, poverty, and so on. And this is even more relevant for the eastern part of the EU, which still needs to overcome some gaps, as we know. Second, the DSA should provide requirements that are observing the limitation of technology. And software developers know that very well, and they are raising awareness about that. Also, the DSA should the policymakers should be aware of the possibilities of the companies, big or small, and especially the foreseeable solutions. You know, they should have, what we recommend is to have a practical mindset. For example, so it is desirable to eliminate all illegal content, but pay attention that automation is not a miracle solution. Also, what is illegal in one member state might be legal in another. It is desirable, of course, to protect consumers, but the government should not decide for them. They should be able to choose, and they shouldn't be deprived of, a personalized digital experiences. It's not only about targeted advertising, it's about personalized digital experiences. It is, of course, desirable to have more interoperability, and we are fully supporting this. But we have to be practical, and we have to have a realistic approach. And for that one, we need first a true market demand, and then trust and standards. It is desirable, of course, to have more transparency, and we are fully supporting that. But this should be meaningful. For example, transparency requirements should not be a pearl for bad actors. It's very important to understand the main parameters of a recommender system, but excessive transparency will be easily exploited. We can foresee that. Also, as it was mentioned before, we should respect trade secrets, and I think meaningful transparency should provide only what is necessary and feasible for regulators to perform their supervisory tasks. Of course, it is desirable to have more control on, on the internet overall, but internet anonymity and encryption have, essential role for certain categories of citizens, like minorities. There are different marginalized or vulnerable categories of people. There are political dissidents. Also, freedom of expression should be preserved. So, and this is even more relevant for the eastern part of the EU. And the scars of the painful past of totalitarianism is still present for many Eastern Europeans like me. Third, the DSA should not be seen in isolation from the other proposals or existing legislation, and correlation should not be made just only for legal consistency, but also with regard to the cumulative effect of the regulatory burdens. And it is not only about online, large online platforms, big companies. Today's amendments that are targeting large companies could be applicable to successful startups, scale-ups. And also, today's amendments that are targeting large companies could be extended to smaller companies. For example, if illegal and harmful content migrates to niche platforms, in 5 or 10 years, we will extend the obligations. So a business-friendly environment is what digital ambitious entrepreneurs need, and they need harmonized and clear rules to operate across a single market, and not a set of 27 rules that sometimes might be divergent. And last but not least, they definitely don't need to find themselves isolated behind a European digital border. And this is even more relevant for the eastern part of the EU, which has, as we know, a good potential for growth. So I hope that in the end, we will have clear rules, a business-friendly DSA that will guarantee ambitious entrepreneurs that the single market works for real and will allow them to innovate and grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Also that you come up with concrete amendments, and I think we have to complete the single market, also the digital market, not to harm it. I think it's also very important that we have practical solutions. And in the end, I think it's also ethical questions. I think endowed for freedom is not this wrong approach, because freedom is a value and you can also mean it in a good way. But we have to say, and of course, there must be everything balanced. But I want to come now to this round where we come in for feedback. Perhaps Eva, the first comment from your side, what you heard, and perhaps you can also say what you want that they are doing now. It's always easy to say what we want, but what these SMEs and associations can still do for you, what they can do to be, what they have to deliver now to be still and have a chance to give an input to DSA. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Horst, and I would like to thank all the speakers and participants in this discussion. It has been very important for me to hear your comments at this stage of the negotiations.
If there is no question, I would give the first reaction to Michael, that he can give his comment. Michael. So, and then we can, Eva, if there are no other questions coming up, can make the wrap up, please.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much to all panelists, because I think it was very inspiring. And thank you, Eva, for your job and contribution to DSA, as you have mentioned. And I think it is important to make DSA much more flexible in some areas. On the one hand, as it was raised in the case of advertisement, because from the perspective of SMEs, it is crucial, yes, not to kill, commonly speaking, not to kill this possibility. But on the other hand, I think what was raised and is very important, that we need to keep the horizontal approach. And from time to time, I'm not sure if it is kept, this kind of horizontal approach. Additionally, we need to avoid fragmentation. So in my view, DSA should create European solutions for European digital market, which means that some authorities and some solutions should be harmonized. As for example, when we are discussing about legal and illegal, DSA is touching this problem, and it is important for the content in the internet, how to remove, under what kind of conditions, the illegal content. But it's clear that we need to discuss harmonization of some solutions at the area of, for example, hate speech, because there is no possibility now, looking at the national, looking at countries and members of the European Union, to make it in the common harmonized way. So harmonization of the parts of the law, national law, is needed. And additionally, when we are discussing about removing some kind of content which is related to disinformation and so on, I think that it's better to keep this kind of solution, which is code of conduct, very useful, and it should be strengthened as it is now after consultations with partners, and Commission will present in the late autumn some solutions. There is a remark about languages and cultures, but I'm talking about legal solutions. Legal could be common in some areas, but when they are talking about harmful content and disinformation, it shouldn't be in this part of legislation. And of course, what is important to combine and to check how DSA could impact on SMEs. Camila expressed the asymmetric regulation which exists in the DSA, and somebody said that for SMEs we should open some sources with data. It's also very important. So my final comment is that we need to continue our discussion on DSA, that we need to avoid national fragmentation if you want to keep DSA as a tool for digital European market. And on the other hand, we need to continue some solutions, for example, open source accessibility of open data during the discussion on Data Act. And advertisement, it is very important for SMEs. So I'm crossing fingers, Eva, for keeping it to the lucky end. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're coming directly to Eva. I think I have, there are no comments. Please now wrap it up and we listen to you.
Thank you very much. As I said, it was very insightful to hear your comments thus far in the negotiations. I think in general, we are among friends here of what we want to achieve with the DSA, especially on the most sensitive topics that have been mentioned. I mean, I very much hope that the shadow meeting that comes in a couple of minutes from now within ECON will not go back on the agreement that we have unofficially struck with the S&D already yesterday, which goes in line and it's more similar to what we would like to see rather than what initially the S&D wanted to see, which is a total ban of targeted advertisement. So in a way, fingers crossed that this agreement will stay. That would also help the position, I believe, in IMCO, and we have had an internal coordination this morning within the EPP group where our position was reaffirmed. Many of you, and this is to wrap up, many of you have expressed the need for clear regulation. That I caught myself saying today is that it is not the last digital related regulation we're working on. It is not the last time we could work also on that regulation. And I think it's important to go step by step and address the most worrying points that could give the opportunity and the tools for the Commission to act fast, to act in a way that is legally sound for the Commission, and to make sure that there are not enough loopholes so that gatekeepers can find their way around them. If we manage to ensure that, I think we'll also, in particular on the DSA, also will be able to provide enough space for SMEs to continue, using the space where they can grow, where they can innovate, and we will not be putting a ban of a certain commercial area that is not what we want to see and what the purpose of this legislation should be. So my team is open to hear you out on some particular and concrete cases, should there be the need. But for now, I hope the, so to say, quasi deal we've already agreed with the socialists on DSA will be confirmed at our last shadows meeting this afternoon. If that is the case, I think we give enough room for IMCO to go ahead with a similar text as well. So thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to be hosting this discussion. It's up to Horst now if the discussion can continue, but I would unfortunately have to leave because my meeting has already started. The one challenge in online meetings is that they end and start at the same time. I want to thank you very much again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you and good luck in the negotiations. Thank you for your time. And we coming now to the end. I think it's really a pleasure to have this debates. SM Connect have always open debates to the public. I think we have to go out of our silos. The discussion must be pragmatically and also focused on common solutions. There are no enemies. There are only goods for citizens of Europe and consumers. I think if everybody is coming to this point of view that there are different interests, but we have to see SMEs have a strong voice SMEs want to work together with consumers. SMEs wants to work together with the large companies. SMEs wants to make business and they want also to grow. And I think if we keep this in mind, then we will come to really good solution for Europe. And this is the target of all stakeholders, I think, who are involved in this, from NGOs to business association to the other different stakeholders. Thank you very much. And I say goodbye. I think we will continue with this discussion also next year if it's about the implementation. Bye. Have a nice day.